Whoa! Hey there, I'm Quinns from the future, and I've come back to tell you that the video you're about to watch, we got a bit wrong. See, I thought in Diskwars you play one command card and can move part of your army, when actually you can play all your command cards and move your whole army each turn, which does change the game slightly. So, we didn't want to remove the video because removing things on the internet is always a terrible idea. So instead, you can find an addendum to this review in the video description. That's all. Enjoy the video, and I'm going to get back to fighting a sexy robot rebellion. Take me home. On this very spot, 2.5 millennia ago, the ancient Greek city of Sparta was founded on two principles: democracy and discs. It was the Greeks who discovered that circles were the most dangerous of our reality's 11 shapes, having realized that the square was too ungainly for battle and the parallelogram was mostly of comedic value. It was knowledge that would pass down through medieval times, all the way through to modern day. It was during the Cold War that America and Russia raced to develop a compact disc, although thanks to the fall of the Soviet Union, these deadly weapons were never deployed in the field and instead repurposed to listen to music. But disc wars haven't been left behind by the march of history. You might see this in your local community. The game of Frisbee, based on the ancient Hellenistic game of Frisbee, with which warriors could practice their aim and which was, in turn, based on the sport Ultimate Frisbee. Huh. That actually makes a lot more sense. Holy cow, how much do I love the concept behind Warhammer Diskwars, or should I just say Diskwars, which was first released in 1999 and sank in an oversaturated market. And recently, the glossmongers at Fantasy Flight have dragged this game back onto the beach of our tables and breathed new life into it with its big corporate money lungs. So that concept, you know how war games with loads of miniatures are really exciting? Collecting a gross, ungainly metal army and then flinging it at your friends so hard you can almost hear the clash of swords. But you know how expensive that is? How much time that hobby takes up? You might be able to see where I'm going with this. Diskwars offers all the joy of fielding an army, except you could fit that army in, for example, a mug. Or your mouth. No. Which isn't to say Diskwars is just a poor man's miniatures game, not least because if you wanted a cheap miniatures game, you could play Infinity, which has each player fielding just a tiny gang, or the excellent X-Wing miniatures game, review of that coming soon. But rather because Diskwars offers something special, something all of its own. Welcome to a round of Diskwars. I'm a video game tutorial man with a charming regional accent that is nonetheless thought of as too oddball for the game proper. So on your turn in Diskwars, you can activate a disc and you can move it by flipping it a number of times equal to its movement value. Or you could do a missile attack and use the range ruler and roll some dice and do some damage. Or you could use a focus attack, a special power, or power, or a disc. And when you flip onto an enemy disc, that disc is pinned and you have a fight. And you'll do an amount of damage equal to your attack value, and they'll do an amount of defensive damage equal to their defense value. And you'll do damage, but you have to do enough damage equal to its stamina value, because at the end of the round, all the tokens will be removed. But there's nothing that stops you from flipping your discs over in a mad little scrum like that and work it out later. Anyway, see, immediately I was quite impressed by Diskwars. You see, I played quite a lot of Warhammer as a kid, and there was something about the scale of that, with all the miniatures stood shoulder to shoulder with so little room for maneuver, that made me feel like a football coach yelling sometimes impotently into the field, watching with terror as my boys ran away or did well. Diskwars has a more zoomed out scale, like the video games, which gave Warhammer a much enlarged battlefield. Suddenly you have room to just simply reposition to think, to spend whole turns feinting and wondering exactly when to charge. It makes you feel more like a commander, and I quite like the hard numbers and the lack of dice rolls in Diskwars. I mean, dice are exciting, but when something big starts flipping towards you and you know it's going to do 6 attack damage and 5 defense, you're looking at your troops in a neat little puzzle, thinking how you're going to take it down. If you move him back and shoot with these troops and then quickly pin it here so it can't charge any further, it feels deeply, deeply tactical. And as another plus, holy cow, look how many armies you get just in the base box. Enough to make dozens of armies of elves or orcs or humans or nasty demony people. It offers an incredible amount of generosity, and it offers an incredible amount of ideas. We have to cover them next. We have to cover the ideas. Come with me, let's cover the ideas. Okay, first interesting idea. Each player gets a hand of command cards, and you're going to pick one of these each turn to determine, if you look in the number in the upper right left-hand corner, how many discs you can move, but it'll also have a special power. But it'll also have a thing that says whether it's bold, devious, steady, or slow, which works as a rock, paper, scissors system. If you play the right card, you can go before your opponent, potentially taking 2 goes back to back if you went last previous turn and then first the next turn, which is interesting, a nice little mini game. Cool idea number 2, how you build a custom army is very clever indeed. You're going to pick your general, and your general is going to tell you how many points you can spend on discs, and your general is also going to tell you how many command cards you can actually have. So every decision you make, what general do you want, leads to what command cards do you want, leads to these are the troops you can have. The decisions you make are interesting and all lead you to the next decision rather than just this overwhelming, what do you want, you can have anything. 3. What you're actually trying to do in a game of Warhammer Diskwars is always changed by a public objective that has a sort of massive victory point thing. Yeah, so for example, score 5 victory points per opponent for each of your discs overlapping their deployment zone, so you're trying to race towards their deployment zone. But each of these public objectives also has a power. For example, in that deployment zone thing, every disc can move further. So when building your army, you don't know actually what that army has to achieve. You've got to be flexible. Cool idea number 4. In addition to that public objective, every player also gets a secret objective. They ignore the power half of the card and just find out how they alone can score victory points. And since there's only 5 of these cards, if you're remotely serious about Diskwars, you will commit them to memory. So when you see your enemy racing towards your general, you're going to realize, oh god, he's going to get 5 points if he kills my general, which means I have to keep my general away. And it is an interesting, slightly sly level to the strategy of Diskwars. 5. Before the game begins, you and your opponent will take turns placing all this cool terrain, which is all double-sided. So on your turn, you might decide to have a forest or a bog. And I like any game that lets a player elect to add a bog to the proceedings. And finally, lovely rule number 6. You don't have to play with 2 people. You can play with 1, 2, 3, even up to 4 players, which is a lovely addition that's all too rare to a competitive game. But you don't have to be quite such a nerd as me when it comes to why Diskwars is good. Let's recap some more basic stuff. It is astonishingly affordable. It has all that gorgeous Warhammer art that Fantasy Flight's been sitting on top of. And in terms of investing in a hobby, Fantasy Flight have already announced that 2 expansions are on the horizon, adding 50 more discs each, dwarves and undead. Surely then, this is a wise purchase. Let me just go get that. Who's at the door? Oh, it's only me, here to tell you that you should think twice about buying Warhammer Diskwars because it has exactly as many problems as it does good ideas. Classic shut up and sit down mid-review turnaround. Let's have a cup of tea. Oh. Hey, do you like my comedy mug? Yeah, this game's not very good. Well, look, it's complicated, all right? So Diskwars cannot decide whether it wants to be a slow, thoughtful, tactical game or just something that's crazy and shit happens and it's a lot of fun, which is going to sound like I'm being really petty, but I'm not. That's huge, all right? Let's say we've got an example here. there's this very powerful disc that's racing towards you, and it's coming towards you, and because you've got all this open information of these numbers, you can think very, very tactically about the solution to this puzzle and how you're going to defeat her. And you can spend, let's say, 2-3 minutes forging the perfect solution in your mind, which is pin with him, retreat with him, and then move forward and put him on top, let him do the blah, 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 blah. So you spend all this time thinking, and then finally you decide and you do this and you move your discs into position, ready to launch your plan next turn, and the enemy rolls a volley of dice and eliminates one of your key players with a lucky roll. You have wasted all of your time thinking. So the original Diskwars, not the Fantasy Flight reprint, had a mechanic where missile combat, rather than dice, was decided on by holding your fist 12 inches above the table and dropping a token on your intended target. And I can see why Fantasy Flight removed that, because it seems crazy, go balls to the ceiling nuts. And also, dice make it easier to sell a game, nice little custom dice. But the thing is, you're given an enormous amount of agency with that token mechanic. Okay, for example, let's say my opponent chooses to send forward not a small disc, but a dragon, and I drop a missile and land it, and it lands on the dragon, just like that. Then it's not just luck anymore, because I skillfully dropped it, and you chose to send forward the big disc, making use of Diskwars' disc physicality. It is less frustrating for both players when you get those lucky hits. Let me put this another way, all right? Diskwars can be horrifically cruel and pointed at times, which is fine in and of itself. Some troops, for example, have impact, which means if you're not paying attention, they might roll over you, and before there's even a combat round, do enough damage to wipe out your disc. Other troops have swift, which means even if you charge in, they might eliminate your troop before your troop even gets a chance to pay attention. You do have to plot, you have to scheme, you watch to see how dangerous missile troops are, where you can advance and where you can't. So you do have to think. The game forces you to spend a long time pontificating. And then it lets your opponent roll some dice and eliminate a key player, so all of your thinking is pointless. You can have games that are slow and strategic. You can have games that are all about risk management. You can even have games that we'll love that are total nonsense. But you do not cross the streams. Don't make me invest emotionally in one aspect of a game and then strip all my passion for that section of the game off, like ripping off a bandage. Still, that is a design error I can understand. What I do not understand is that in a game based around Warhammer and fielding huge armies that you feel so proud of and so full of excitement and life, you can only ever move 2 to 4 discs in a turn. So you've got all these orcs, and you go 1, and you go 2, and you go 3, and these guys all basically sit around eating their packed lunches, orc lunches, whatever, and they don't move, which is so unexciting. And worse, because the field, which is huge and has to be 3 ruler lengths along, is actually quite massive, and the game only lasts 5 rounds, you have to think about moving troops out if you even want to be able to use them in a game. Essentially, it's not just that you have to plan your strategy in advance, you have to plan your fun in advance and begin hobbling towards opponents if you even want to fight, which is, woe betide any game that comes to shut up and sit down and forces us to work for our fun. So there you have it. Warhammer Diskwars is the best collection of ideas I've seen all month, with a similar streak of features that myself and my friends found actively unpleasant. I cannot overstate how limiting and frustrating it felt to be maneuvering armies slowly and knowing that just that is 20% of the entire game. If turns 1 and 2 of a 5-turn game are just positioning, and by turn 5 you can probably make a good guess as to who's won, you're looking at an hour-long game with 20 maybe good minutes. And that is a pretty poor proposition. I know that you could probably house rule this, more so than many of the games we cover. I think you could probably shrink the arena from 3 ruler lengths to 2.5 or 2 ruler lengths. You could probably throw away those command cards so you can move your whole army, but we aren't in the business of reviewing how good a game could be if you tweaked it. We review the game as it comes out of the box, and this is just a bit disappointing. Tell you what's still not disappointing though. If you want an affordable, tactical, collectible, pleasingly two-dimensional strategic game, Summoner Wars is still your boy, and it's particularly relevant here because it is also a game that is all about positioning. All right, as two wizards square off and summon armies on a grid towards each other. However, it's relevant here because it throws two armies into conflict from turn 1. And the final turn is even more exciting than the last because of this thing where your summoner's magic ability is represented by a deck of cards. That deck of cards can run out, leading to fantastic photo finishes where two wizards, both out of magic, end up having to run towards each other and just beat each other up with sticks. It is glorious and still features lots of tense dice rolling and real wit, but manages to blend them together effortlessly in a way that Diskwars just doesn't. Oh, and those of you looking for more miniatures game coverage on Shut Up and Sit Down will be pleased to know that we'll be doing a proper review of the X-Wing miniatures game very shortly. In fact, I've actually just ordered the Tantive 4. Be arriving any day now, so I'm just gonna wait here. Yep. Gonna wait right here. Bye everybody.